And in the periods leading up to the recent basic education certificate examinations, there were widespread reports and concerns that JHS 3 students were not provided with textbooks for the newly introduced curriculum, which was expected to be followed. This situation caused anxiety among students and teachers, with many feeling unprepared for exams based on the syllabus they had been adequately resourced to study. Students were reportedly writing exams on a new syllabus without having access to the approved textbooks or any government-supplied textbooks for their new curriculum. Some reports suggest that teachers also found it difficult to prepare students because there was a lack of proper learning materials, leading to concerns about the quality of education and preparedness for the exam. Some critics noted that efforts and resources were being diverted to senior high school SHS students, such as laptop distributions, while the foundational basic education was neglected. Africa Education Watch has released a statement calling for a committee of inquiry into examination malpractice in Ghana as a result of the lack textbooks ahead of the just ended BECE exam. Let's turn to our video wall for excerpts of the statements coming in from the Africa Education Watch. It reads, the Africa Education Watch, Edu Watch, notes with grave concern the findings of the recently published GH Probe undercover investigations into examination malpractice during the 2025 Basic Education Certificate Examination BECE in selected basic schools in Accra. The investigation reveals systemic lapses that compromise the credibility of Ghana's external assessment system, raising serious questions about the integrity of the nations that serve as gateways to further education. Now, while the revelations are not new, they present an opportunity for reflection and a systemic resolution rather than an incidental response that merely sanctions culprits in the affected schools while leaving the root causes unaddressed. EduWatch calls on the Ministry of Education to immediately establish a high-level committee of inquiry to investigate the full scope and dimensions of examination malpractice across the country. The committee must not only establish the extent and enablers of malpractice, but also propose comprehensive reforms to strengthen the integrity of external assessments. The outcome of this process should inform systemic reforms that secure fairness, restore public confidence, and safeguard the future of Ghana's education system. This is coming from the Africa Education Watch. Kofi Asare is the Executive Director of Africa Education Watch and is joining us via Zoom for a conversation. Good evening, Kofi, and thanks for joining us on Newsnight.
Hi, good evening, and good evening to your choice audience.
Now, even before we come to your statement you released earlier, let's look at the issue of the lack of textbooks that took center stage prior to the Basic Education Certificate examination. What immediate actions do you think the government should take to address the textbook shortage?
We still have inadequate textbooks in our schools. In 2023-2024, we did a survey of 20 districts. The deficit was as high as about 35%. In March this year, we went to the field, collected data, realized that the deficit was even more than 35%. It goes up to 50% for some core subject areas, even in endowed areas. We discovered that in the education budget of 2025, specifically in the debt fund formula, an amount of 400 million Ghana cedis was allocated for the procurement of textbooks for basic schools. We were happy when we saw the allocation. We I'm expecting that by now procurement processes should be underway because get fund formula was approved sometime in April or so. And so we want to call on the Ministry of Education to expedite action on the processes leading to the procurement of books for public basic schools so that we are able to improve the quality issues in basic schools.
Right. Now, Kofi, how can the government also ensure that the publishers are paid on time to avoid such situations in the future?
Yes, we've had issues with debt to publishers in the past. The comfort is that we have this 450 million allocation under GET Fund. GET Fund is the only reliable funding stream presently in the education envelope. And so it gives us comfort that there's reliable funding to procure the textbooks. There is always a process to go through, and sometimes it takes time. But we will continue to call on authorities to expedite the procurement process so that we're able to see textbooks. Last week, I was in a school in East Legon, and I mean, there's a school in East Legon here called Accra, the STEM school near the Gethsemane Cemetery. It's a new school, very, one of the most advanced schools in Ghana, basic schools, public school, basic school. They don't even have a single textbook. So parents are the ones buying textbooks for their children. Public basic school, even in East Legon here. So it tells you that even in endowed areas, there are schools without even one textbook, like the East Legon STEM basic school. So we will continue to knock on the doors of the Ministry of Education, GET Fund, Ministry of Finance, to expedite the processes so that we are able to see textbooks in our basic schools as the new academic year has just begun.
Now, from where you sit, what alternative learning materials or solutions would you recommend for students in the meantime?
Well, the teachers have their guide. They are teaching their resource packs, okay? And so they are trained to be able to teach with the resource pack, which includes the lesson guide and all that. So that's what teachers have been using to teach in the absence of textbooks in many of the, especially core subject areas. We also want to encourage parents to try and buy supplementary, books to support what is available or what is not available. It makes the teaching easier. It makes the learning experience much more easier. Education is a collective process. I'm not saying that government should shirk its responsibility in providing textbooks. No, it is non-negotiable. But parents must support with other, supplementary books, even when textbooks are available, because it makes the learning experience much more easier for their children, and also to enable teachers, meet their, performance indicators.
All right, now let's shift to the statement you released earlier on your outfit calling for a committee of inquiry into examination malpractices in Ghana. What exactly are you seeking to gain from this?
Well, having watched the expose, the dark world of BECE, we've seen a statement from the Ghana Education Service indicating that they will do further investigation and ensure that all teachers involved are sanctioned. That is in the right direction. When teachers flout the standards, the rules and protocols governing the conduct of teachers during examinations, they must be sanctioned in accordance with the same. So that's in the right direction. But we wanted to draw the government's attention to the fact that the investigation, DH probe investigation, only reveals, a piece of a big cake. It is not an outlier. It is what happens in many schools in Ghana. It has been happening for years. And so we shouldn't see the investigative piece as an incidental one, which requires an incidental response, i.e., punishing the culprits, and then that's it. No. We should see this investigative piece as a launch pad to delve much into the entire examination malpractice industry. undertake a surgical knife inquiry into what are the key drivers of examination malpractice and examination fraud, the dimensions, what are the facilitators, and then understand its various manifestations. It is only when a comprehensive inquiry is done that the Ghana Education Service and the Ministry of Education can fashion out an appropriate systemic response to cure the systemic drivers of this canker. Other than that, if we just go ahead, pursue investigations, dismiss teachers who are involved in the video, which is great, if we end there, what we would have done would have been to simply address the symptoms when the root of the problem exists. This is not the first undercover documentary into examination malpractice. But in the past, what we've seen is that the response of institutions has been to address the issue as an incident. This is not an incident. This is a sample of wider, challenge facing, especially the pre-tertiary sector. So let's take that opportunity to delve much into the situation, understand these dynamics, and then come out with systemic reforms that will improve credibility, improve confidence, improve trust, and improve the fairness and integrity of our assessment system.
Right. Now, Kofi, do you not think we should run our own system where we have absolute control over the questions and the process going forward?
Well, I don't think the solution lies in us running our own system. Every policy, every intervention will have challenges. Nigeria is running their own BECE. They took it from WAEC. And so Nigeria's version of our NACA is running their own BECE. But it doesn't mean that will be without challenges. I don't think it's a matter of taking over BECE from WAEC, because even if we give BECE to NACA, as Nigeria has done, it won't solve any of the challenges that we are facing today. BECE questions are not leaking. So it's not a problem of leakage of questions or having fun leak of questions. It is more an issue of collusion in examination room. It's an issue of teachers, head teachers, district directors having key performance indicators that are based on BECE pass rates. So if you are asked to meet a target of 80% pass in maths, 80% pass in English in your district, similar contract are signed with the school heads, same indicators. So to be seen to be working in the midst of limited or no textbooks in some schools, you must produce the magic. That is the core motivation for teachers participating in such a risky enterprise. Of course, there are other factors, but that for me is key. And so if we don't change the systemic drivers, if we don't change the incentives, we will not address the issue by merely changing the examiner and bringing another body. So, as I said, if we have a committee of inquiry delving much deeper into the examination malpractice canker, both BECE and WASI, and its various manifestations and dynamics, and the drivers and motivations and everything, the 360 surgical knife inquiry, I'm sure that we should have the luxury of solid recommendations that, based on the political will to implement, should transform and strengthen the integrity of our assessment system in Ghana. But if we continue to adapt the incidental approach where the issue happens, you investigate, go to the school, dismiss teachers, and then we come back every year, we will be reporting these cases, because that doesn't solve the issue from its root. It only addresses the symptoms.
All right, Kofi Asare is Executive Director of Africa Education Watch. They're speaking to us about the recent examination malpractices that has been characterized during our various examinations in the country.